I'm pleased to introduce my friend Carolyn. She is a Zen teacher and authorized Dharma successor of Rosalind Stone, Roshi of the Mountain Moon Sangha. She's been practicing Zen meditation since 1985 and guiding Zen practice since 2015. Carolyn's a biologist and a public servant who focuses on wildlife conservation. She's also an appointed Zen teacher with Sambo Zen International. This is where I met Carolyn, in the Sambo Zen gatherings from NAS way back in 2010, I believe, to the most recent Kenshikai this past summer. If you haven't heard Carolyn speak, you're really in for a treat. I've heard numerous of her teisho. They're always penetrating and wise and relaxed. At our training sessions in Kenshikai, I find her questions, her comments, her insights, and her presentations of the koans unique and often humorous. So I really am glad you're here for us tonight, Carolyn.
Greetings, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Scott, for that warm welcome. And my thanks to Valerie for inviting me to speak to you. I would like us to take a moment to appreciate the path that has brought us together here in this way. Whatever your path may be, the causes and conditions that have brought you here tonight, or I suppose, well, whatever time zone you're in, or those listening to the recording later. Today, I'm going to talk about case 2 in the Mumonkan, Hyakujo and the fox. And the first part of this case is also found in the Shoyoroku, the Book of Equanimity, case 8. I'll start by reading the koan. This is the version from the Mumonkan. And it's a long one, so bear with me. Whenever Master Hyakujo delivered a sermon, an old man was always there listening with the monks. When they left, he left too. One day, however, he remained behind. I should ask, can everybody hear me okay? Okay, good. The master asked him, "What man are you standing in front of me?" The old man replied, "Indeed, I am not a man. In the past, in the time of Kashyapa Buddha, I lived on this mountain as a Zen priest. On one occasion, a monk asked me, 'Does a perfectly enlightened person fall under the law of cause and effect or not?' I answered, 'He does not.' And because of this answer, I fell into the state of a fox for 500 lives. Now, I beg you, Master, please say a turning word on my behalf and release me from the body of a fox." Then he asked, "Does a perfectly enlightened person fall under the law of cause and effect or not?" The master answered, "The law of cause and effect cannot be obscured." Upon hearing this, the old man immediately became deeply enlightened. Making his bows, he said, "I have now been released from the body of a fox and will be behind the mountain. I dare to make a request of the master. Please perform my funeral as you would for a deceased priest. The master had the Ino strike the anvil with a gavel and announced to the monks that after the meal, there would be a funeral service for a deceased priest. The monks wondered, saying, "All are healthy. No one is sick in the infirmary. What is this all about?" After the meal, the master led the monks to the foot of a rock behind the mountain, and with his staff, he poked out the dead body of a fox. He then performed the ceremony of cremation. That evening, the master ascended the rostrum in the hall and told the monks the whole story. Obaku thereupon asked, "The old man of old missed the turning word and fell into the state of a fox for 500 lives. Suppose every time he answered, he made no mistakes. What would happen then?" The master said, "Just come near and I'll tell you." Obaku then went up to the master and slapped him. The master clapped his hands and, laughing aloud, said, "I thought the barbarian's beard was red, but here is a barbarian with a red beard." Mumonkan gives a very brief commentary on this koan. Not falling under the law of cause and effect. For what reason had he fallen into the state of a fox? The law of cause and effect cannot be obscured. For what reason has he been released from a fox's body? If in regard to this, you have the one eye, then you will understand that the former Hyakujo enjoyed 500 lives of grace as a fox. And then the verse. Not falling, not obscuring, two faces, one die. Not obscuring, not falling, 1,000 mistakes, 10,000 mistakes. Well, this is a very unusual koan. And it's very different from the first koan in the Mumonkan, Joshu's dog, better known as Mu. It's almost as if Mumon is trying to shake us out of any preconception of what a koan is. And I really can't think of any other well-known koan that is quite like this one. I'd like to start by talking a little bit about Hyakujo. So he was a very early Chinese master. He lived from 720 to 814 AD. That's a very long time ago. And in the Dharma lineage, he is Ino's great-grandson, so the sixth patriarch. His master was Baso, and he had several well-known students, including Obaku, who's in this story, and who was Rinzai's master, and Isan, who founded the Ikkyo sect. So he is the ancestor of more than one school of Zen in China. He's also known for making the rules for monastic living, including the practice of monks sleeping, sitting, and taking meals on the same mat, and raising their own food by farming rather than begging. He's well known for saying, a day of no work is a day of no eating. Like many Zen masters, he's named for the mountain that he lives on, Hyakujo. And so the old man that comes to see him is also known as Hyakujo. So we'll call him the former Hyakujo and the latter Hyakujo. He also appears in quite a few other well-known koans. An example is from the Blue Cliff record, the Hekigon Roku, 3 cases, 7-1, 7-2, 7-3, in which he asks his students, while keeping your throat, mouth, and lips closed, how will you say something? So this is not a man to be trifled with. And yet, this koan, Hyakujo and the Fox, seems like it's a very strange and fanciful story. But like any koan, it has many levels to it. On the surface, one could imagine that in Hyakujo's temple, maybe there were monks who thought that Kensho made them special, that they would no longer be subject to cause and effect. Maybe they thought they could get away with things, with not following the rules, not working for their meals, not washing their dishes, or being unkind to people. My teacher, Seinan Roshi, Rosalind Stone, used to say that the role of a Zen master is to hold a student's feet firmly to the ground. So is that what Hyakujo is doing here? Trying to keep his students from being stuck or flying off into Never Never Land. That may be one way that this is a helpful story to appear right after Joshu's dog. Perhaps helpful, perhaps a little on the obvious side. So, what can we say about obscuring or not obscuring the law of cause and effect? At its core, cause and effect is this. I let go of the stick, that's the cause. It falls, that's the effect. In the koan, Hyakujo says cause and effect cannot be obscured. On the surface, again, this is simple logic. Even if I close my eyes, the stick still falls. And I caught it too. Even if I don't believe in the laws of gravity, the stick still falls. Even if I don't believe in human-caused climate change, hurricanes will still get stronger. Fires burn hotter and floods will be more extreme than when I was young. And even though we are surrounded by efforts to obscure the laws of cause and effect, to pretend that these things aren't happening, to hope that they will go away, still, they happen. Averting one's eyes from the law of cause and effect is not very hard, but it doesn't stop it from, as my father-in-law used to say, biting you in the nose anyway. And this is equally true before Kensho and after Kensho. But again, this is just plain logic. It is what we call the phenomenal world point of view. So, what makes this a koan? Haku and Zenji considered this to be a very difficult koan, and I think I agree with him. Also a very important one for deepening one's practice after Kensho. You see, from the essential world point of view, there is nothing for cause to effect. There is no change. How can essential nature affect essential nature? How can it obscure or be obscured? The true way is beyond cause and effect and beyond emptiness. It's nothing but ow. So the practice of this koan is to experience. Cause and effect cannot be obscured. In a world where this moment encompasses past and future, where this very moment encompasses being born, dying, and everything in between, where the sound of the bell is all of existence, how can there be such a thing as cause and effect? But let's look at it more closely. Now, it's a very long story, and I'm not going to talk about every single aspect of it. But if it's helpful if we think about, hey, there's four main characters. There's the unnamed monk. There's the old man, who is also a fox and is also named Hyakujo. There's the master Hyakujo, who's telling us this story. And there's his senior student, Obaku. So those are the characters to keep straight. And then there are three separate dialogues. So I'm going to talk first about the first two. In the first of those dialogues, the unnamed monk asks the former Hyakujo, does a perfectly enlightened person fall under the law of cause and effect? And the former Hyakujo says no, and is turned into a fox. In the second dialogue, the former Hyakujo describes this dialogue to the master Hyakujo and asks for a turning word, which means he's asking for him to say something which will turn his perspective. The master replies, the law of cause and effect cannot be obscured. And this turning word leads to the former Hyakujo's enlightenment and release from being a fox. So now, what is cause and effect? I've already talked about it from the phenomenal world point of view. I've talked about it from an empty world point of view. But when Hyakujo says cause and effect cannot be obscured, he's not talking about the explanations I gave earlier. He's pointing to something more fundamental, and he's inviting us to examine what is this stick really? What does it mean to let go of the stick? What is falling? Hyakujo, the latter Hyakujo, the master sees clearly that this stick is nothing other than falling itself. And falling is nothing other than the stick. The hand and the stick are not two. And yet, the stick falls. That is the mystery. Cause and effect itself is nothing other than stick. Nothing other than John or Julie or Kevin. How can this be? On the one hand, this truth is not easy to see. But on the other hand, it is presenting itself to us continuously. What could possibly obscure it? The falling stick gives us an impression of two. Hand and stick together and then apart. Even when we realize that hand and stick are not two, still the stick falls. This is what is meant by cause and effect, not obscured. When the former Hyakujo says, no, a perfectly enlightened person does not fall under the law of cause and effect, he is making two mistakes. First, he is creating a separation between the person and the law of cause and effect. And then he's implying that becoming enlightened somehow changes the fundamental laws, the fundamental nature of reality. Both are wrong. The latter Hyakujo avoids those pitfalls by answering cause and effect cannot be obscured. There's one more point I would like to make before leaving the topic of cause and effect. Sometimes people are tempted to argue over whether or not the former Hyakujo actually turned into a fox. Dogen's opinion was that this was impossible. But usually when people make that argument, they mean, what? How can a person turn into a fox? That just doesn't happen. Dogen was not saying, I don't think, that the former Hyakujo has nothing to do with a fox. Not at all. The old man could not turn into a fox because man and fox are not two. How can one possibly turn into the other? How can you possibly turn into a Buddha? You already are that. This is not an easy point to get. But I think it is what Mumonkan was expressing with his commentary. The former Hyakujo enjoyed 500 lives of grace as a fox. And I think that's why Mumonkan put this koan in his collection. I can remember many years ago, after one of the NAS session in Toronto, we went for a walk on the Scarborough Bluffs nearby, and I watched a fox trotting up the hillside, carrying a rabbit that was almost as big as herself. It was May, so it is likely that she was carrying it to her den to feed her pups. Such excitement when she got to her den. All of these pups scrabbling over each other, yipping and trying to get at this enormous amount of fresh meat. That is cause and effect, not obscured. Now, I will turn to the final dialogue. The full story is explained to the assembly of monks, and Obaku asks, the old man of old missed the turning word and fell into the state of a fox for 500 lives. Suppose every time he answered, he made no mistakes. What would have happened then? The master said, just come nearer and I'll tell you. Obaku then went up to the master and slapped him. Now, we understand that he would not really have slapped his master. Valerie and I were talking about this koan, and she suggested to me that perhaps it was a meeting of arms between master and student. And then the master clapped his hands and, laughing aloud, said, I thought the barbarian's beard was red, but here is a barbarian with the red beard, which is a reference to Bodhidharma. He is saying, wow, here's Bodhidharma right in front of me. Obaku is asking us to delve deeply into the question of what is a mistake? It is only when you look at things from the point of view of separation that you can see mistakes. 1,000 mistakes, 10,000 mistakes. The old man made an error. As a consequence, he turned into a fox. That is only possible from the standpoint of separation. But when you look from the point of view of oneness, wholeness, there is no possibility of a mistake. The former Hyakujo's no fills all of existence. What room is there for calling something a mistake? The monk's question, does a perfectly enlightened man fall under the law of cause and effect? Just that. One could say that mistake is a characteristic of separation, and perfection is a characteristic of oneness. But do not forget Mumonkan's verse. Two faces, one die. These are not describing different worlds. He's referring to gaming dice. These do not describe different worlds. They're describing one world in different ways, different faces of the die. Hyakujo sees that Obaku understands all of this in his question and response, which is why he laughs and likens him to Bodhidharma, the barbarian with the red beard. He's delighted to have a student that can match him. But I like to end on one final note, because I want to make sure that you do not misunderstand this. Cause and effect cannot be obscured. When Putin invaded Ukraine, he unleashed an enormous chain of suffering. Ukrainians dying, being displaced, Russian soldiers dying, people in Africa going hungry, political tensions rising around the world. Cause, effect, cause, effect. That. Dropping the stick, dropping the bombs. Not to, but still. Cause and effect. Still, rain falls and flowers grow. Some cause brought you here this evening, and this cannot be obscured. Thank you. And yes, I'm happy to take questions. And if there's questions online, people can raise their hands or put something in the chat. I've got the chat open.
I was thinking when you said cause and effect cannot be obscured, just what came to my mind was that there's a physical aspect of survival. And is that kind of in that category, even though we're not categorizing this, it's all one with the non-physical world? Is there a part of survival in there, like the fox had to eat the rabbits, right? They had to eat. So that's kind of like a physical level, because we're here on a physical level. So is that part of cause and effect? And then we have to think that it's not separate from anything?
So if I understand your question, it does seem to me that the reason we view cause and effect as separate, one thing happens, then the next, this causes this. The reason we view separation is because it is necessary for our survival to do so. But it's also important. We have a tendency, we Zennies, as my teacher used to call us all, to think somehow that that point of view is inferior to the point of view of oneness. And although it's certainly easier to see the world from the point of view of separation, I don't think it's quite right to think that it's somehow lesser than the point of view of oneness. Does that help?
Yes. Yeah, I don't see it as lesser. I'm just trying to grasp the physical world where we are surviving because of cause and effect, and then not separate it from the world of being a fox, which is not a separate entity in itself.
Yeah, I think maybe that's getting a little tangled up in concepts.
Okay, I'll think about it a little more.
Yeah. Or maybe a little less too.
You're right. Anybody else?
Hi, Carolyn. Thank you so much. My question is, Basho's teacher, what was he going to do when he said, come here? Was he going to slap him, thus the crossed hands? Very curious.
Me too. The crossed hands is Valerie's image of what might have happened. And if that is what happened, I think it's merely a matter of Hyakujo having very quick reflexes or knowing his student very well. Yeah. What do you think he was going to do?
I thought he was going to whack him. I thought the response was a response to the response.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Who knows? I mean, we are talking about the lineage that led to Rinzai, which is all about slapping and pushing and hitting people. So maybe so.
Thank you.
I see a question in the chat. Somebody is asking, is there a connection between a red fox and a red beard in the last answer? I don't think it says anywhere what color fox it is. In North America, we have red foxes, but we have foxes of other colors. And I don't know what color foxes are in China. So I wouldn't assume that. That's what you get for asking a biologist.
Hello, Carolyn.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you for your talk. So, from the place of oneness, doesn't it seem like everything is still functioning just like in the place of separation, doesn't it? The functioning goes on. So, can you say a few words about in oneness, what's happening with cause and effect?
That's a very interesting question. So remember, when we talk about the viewpoint of separation and the viewpoint of oneness, you can think about those words quite literally. You know, there's someone standing on this point and the view they see is this, and someone standing on this point and the view they see is that, but they're looking at the same thing. It is the same world. So the function that we call cause and effect, that function is functioning. but our understanding of what's happening is different. Does that
Yes.
make any sense?
Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Someone in the chat asks, is Obaku presenting a perfect mistake? Well, you could say that if he actually hit his teacher, that was a perfect mistake. But what is a mistake? That's something you need to explore very deeply.
Hello, Carolyn. Question: how, like being a Zen practitioner, how should we think about cause and effect in relation towards awakening or enlightenment? How important is it for us to think about cause and effect on the path towards awakening?
Well, I guess there's two different responses I could give. One is that how do I put this? You know, we like to tell our students that if you practice Zen, you get some effect. So there's a cause and effect relationship. There's a, you know, but that's ordinary perception point of view. And we will also say that, there's something lovely that Henry said about that. And I'm trying to remember exactly his words, you know, that the practice does not respond well to goal setting, something along those lines, right? You cannot become anything that you are not already. There's a number of koans that treat that point. And the practice really is about seeing that so clearly that you actually know it's true.
Hi, I'm Kevin. Thank you for your talk. I have a question about mistake. May a mistake be the failure to attain an expectation?
only from the point of view of separation. I'll tell you that this proposal that I made during my talk, that the mistake is a function of separation and perfection is a function of oneness or wholeness. That insight just came to me a few days ago, and actually not specifically in a Zen context, in the context of talking to somebody who's being very hard on themselves. But then I started sitting with the third dialogue in this koan again, and I saw that. And I found it very helpful, such a relief to know that from the point of view of oneness, there's no such thing as a mistake, which does not negate the fact that we can take actions that harm other people. It's a very delicate and somewhat mysterious I want to say dance. I don't know if that's the right word. To hold all those points of view at the same time.
Thank you, Carolyn, so much. I had a question about cause and effect also, and I don't know if I can quite formulate it, but around here in our book study, we've been talking about free will, and in various presentations, we've been talking about free will. And I guess my question has to do with, there's a cause and there's an effect. Let's say Putin bombs Ukraine, and clearly that's a mistake. And yet, is it like all the conditioning that has created Vladimir Putin for who he is presupposes that he's going to make this mistake?
Can we absolve him from responsibility?
Right now, no. Of course,
Yeah,
that's the delicate dance, right?
that's the delicate dance. So this is such an important question around free will. And I think it's certainly something that I struggled with in my practice for many, many years. And I think probably we all do. If this moment is all of space and time and existence, what does free will mean? And the only insight that I have had into that is that this moment is all of space and time and existence, and therefore the choice I make right now it exerts, it is all of existence. So it's not that there's a contradiction. It's not that this viewpoint of oneness takes away anything from the significance of the choice I make about the next word I'm going to say. It's just our limited capacity to see and understand that makes it look like that. And I don't know if I'm being very clear or not. What do you think?
I think I cannot be nearly that clear. Perhaps it's the problem with language, or
Yeah,
you know,
that's not an easy one.
clearly we hold ourselves responsible. We hold Vladimir Putin responsible. I read an article recently about addiction and how we must have accountability but not blame.
Yeah.
But perhaps we're getting into another.
I'm thinking of a lovely quote I heard on our Canada's version of National Public Radio, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And somewhere I have written down he said this, but I can't think of it right now. Something along the lines of everybody in some way is hurting, and therefore we must be kind. And I think that's very beautiful. And maybe the cause of that hurting is the viewpoint of separation. Because there's no question in my mind that the healing comes from the viewpoint of oneness.
I'm curious what caused you to choose this particular koan.
Because my teacher taught me that when you are embarking on a regular practice of giving teisho, that you start at the beginning and you go one by one. So, last time I just dipped into something that caught my fancy. And in previous circumstances, I've given teisho on Joshu's dog a number of times. So I thought it was time to start going one by one.
Well, thank you for doing that. It's been quite enlightening. Thank you.
I'm glad of it because, to be honest, the first few times I never really liked that koan, and now I think it's quite lovely.
So, Carolyn, thank you so much for sharing your Dharma with us tonight, and for taking
My pleasure.